There is a moment in every geopolitical crisis when the line between rhetoric and kinetic action becomes so thin that the distinction ceases to matter. And on this particular Sunday, February the 8th, 2026, Super Bowl Sunday in the United States of America, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps crossed that threshold with a meticulously produced propaganda video that explicitly modeled, frame by frame, the destruction of the USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered supercarrier currently stationed in waters proximate to Iran, carrying approximately 90 combat aircraft, including 5th-generation F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters and battle-proven F divided by a -18E divided by F Super Hornets. A floating sovereign military installation capable of projecting more raw destructive power than most nation-states possess in their entire arsenals combined. This is not a drill. The IRGC, the most ideologically zealous and operationally autonomous military organ of the Iranian theocratic state, released this video on the same day the American public was preparing to gather for the biggest sporting event in the country, and the timing was not coincidental, but rather deliberate psychological warfare calibrated to maximum provocation, demanding a response not of panic, but of absolute strategic clarity about what happens next if the regime in Tehran is foolish enough to convert its cinematic fantasies into a single fired round. The video itself reveals far more about Iranian strategic thinking than any diplomatic cable or back-channel communication ever could. The footage, distributed through IRGC-affiliated media channels and amplified across Iranian state television, opens with digitally rendered but militarily specific simulations of anti-ship ballistic missiles arcing through the atmosphere on terminal trajectories aimed directly at the flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. The missiles depicted are not generic. They bear the visual signatures of Iran's most advanced solid-fueled ballistic platforms, and the simulation shows them penetrating the carrier's defensive envelope, striking the deck, and detonating with catastrophic force, splitting the vessel and igniting its aviation fuel reserves. The video then transitions to undersea warfare, specifically a submarine-launched torpedo engaging the carrier's hull below the waterline, a scenario that would compromise the ship's watertight integrity and accelerate its sinking. From there, the propaganda reel escalates further, showing swarms of fast attack boats, the kind the IRGC Navy operates in large numbers throughout the Strait of Hormuz, converging from multiple vectors, firing rockets, and laying naval mines to trap escorting destroyers in a kill zone. Drones, both explosive kamikaze variants and surveillance platforms, are shown orbiting the carrier group, delivering precision strikes on radar arrays and communications masts. The video concludes with IRGC personnel celebrating the simulated annihilation of the most potent symbol of American naval power on Earth. This is qualitatively different from prior hostile propaganda because it is operationally specific. It names the ship, models the actual missile systems Iran has deployed to launch status, and choreographs a multi-domain combined arms attack mirroring known IRGC wargaming doctrine. This is not a cartoon. This is a rehearsal broadcast to the world. Which brings us to the missiles, because the hardware Iran rolled out to the cameras on the same day tells a story far more dangerous than any animation. Iranian state television, in a move clearly coordinated with the IRGC media wing, broadcast imagery and technical details of 3 ballistic missile systems brought to operational readiness and dispersed across the country's vast network of underground missile cities, hardened bunkers carved deep into the Zagros Mountains designed to survive a first strike from the United States. The 3 systems displayed were the Zolfaghar, the Fatah, and the Kheibar-Shekan, each representing a distinct layer in Iran's increasingly sophisticated ballistic missile architecture. The Zolfaghar is a road-mobile, single-stage, solid-propellant short-range ballistic missile with an operational range of approximately 430 miles, placing every American military installation in the Gulf Cooperation Council states within its targeting envelope, including Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE, and the 5th Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain. What makes the Zolfaghar particularly concerning is not merely its range, but its terminal guidance package incorporating a maneuverable re-entry vehicle, meaning that in the final phase of flight, as it descends at several times the speed of sound, it can alter trajectory to evade incoming interceptors. A maneuvering warhead dramatically complicates the fire control solutions that American missile defense radars must calculate in seconds between detection and interception, transforming a ballistic missile from a dumb projectile into a guided weapon, and when multiplied across hundreds of simultaneous launches. The mathematics begin to strain even the most advanced integrated air and missile defense architectures in the American inventory. The second system, and arguably the most terrifying from a pure physics standpoint, is the Fatah, specifically the Fatah, one hypersonic missile capable of reaching speeds between Mach 13 and Mach 15 during its terminal phase. To understand what that means in practical terms, consider that Mach 15 approaches 11,500 miles per hour. At those velocities, a warhead carrying up to 1,000 pounds of high explosive becomes a kinetic energy weapon of extraordinary destructive potential, because the energy delivered on impact is a function of mass multiplied by the square of velocity, and at Mach 15, the velocity term dominates to a degree that makes the explosive content almost secondary to the sheer physical devastation of impact itself. A 1,000-pound warhead arriving at Mach 15 would strike with force approaching a small tactical weapon, compressing the defender's reaction window to mere seconds between detection and arrival. The Aegis combat system, the most sophisticated naval air defense architecture on the planet, was fundamentally architected in an era when the primary threat was a ballistic re-entry vehicle following a predictable parabolic arc. A hypersonic missile with terminal maneuverability at Mach 15 represents a qualitatively different challenge, pushing the standard missile, 3 and SM-6 interceptors to their absolute physical limits and potentially beyond. In a saturation attack where dozens of Fatah missiles launch simultaneously alongside hundreds of slower conventional ballistic missiles and drone swarms, the defensive calculus becomes extraordinarily demanding. The Kheibar-Shekan completes the triad with a medium-range ballistic missile extending Iran's strike radius to over 900 miles. Solid-fueled and designed for rapid deployment from mobile launchers, it can be transported, erected, and fired from virtually any prepared surface within minutes, making it exceptionally difficult to locate and destroy preemptively. Its high terminal maneuverability makes it a credible threat to fixed installations and potentially naval vessels. The confirmed placement on launch status, missiles mated to launchers, launchers dispersed to pre-surveyed firing positions, crews given authorization codes, is a development of the highest strategic significance. A missile on launch status is not a missile in a warehouse. It is a loaded gun with the safety off, and the finger is on the trigger. The dispersal across Iran's underground missile cities is itself a declaration of intent. Iran has spent decades constructing subterranean facilities buried hundreds of feet below solid rock, designed to withstand the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, the largest conventional bomb in the American arsenal. These are fully integrated launch complexes with their own power generation, ventilation, and command infrastructure, connected to the surface by concealed tunnel exits through which mobile launchers can emerge, fire, and retreat in minutes. The fact that they are now executing this cycle with live warheads tells us the decision-making process governing Iran's use of force is either completed or in its final stages. This assessment is reinforced by the utter collapse of diplomacy. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has made it unambiguously clear that the Islamic Republic will not negotiate on uranium enrichment, will not accept limitations on ballistic missile development, and will not entertain any framework compromising what Tehran describes as its sovereign right to self-defense. This is not a negotiating position. This is a closing statement. When a regime simultaneously refuses to negotiate, deploys its most advanced weapons to launch status, releases propaganda depicting your carrier's destruction, and activates its underground missile infrastructure, the rational conclusion is not that they are bluffing. The rational conclusion is that they are preparing, and the question is no longer whether a confrontation will occur, but when and on whose terms. Which brings us to the most enigmatic and potentially most significant development of this entire escalation cycle, the mysterious disappearance of the F-22 Raptors from the Super Bowl flyover. The flyover at Levi's Stadium was supposed to feature the F-22 Raptor, the undisputed apex predator of the skies since its initial operational capability in 2005, a stealth aircraft so advanced that no adversary air defense system has ever successfully tracked and engaged it. On the day the IRGC released its propaganda video and put its missiles on launch status, the F-22s were pulled for what the Department of Defense described only as operational assignments not disclosed to the public. The F-22 played a pivotal role in Operation Midnight Hammer, the devastating American and Israeli air campaign against Iranian infrastructure executed in June 2025. During that operation, Raptors were deployed as forward sensor platforms deep inside Iranian airspace, leveraging their APG-77 radar and stealth to provide real-time targeting data that enabled the suppression of Iran's S-300 PMU-2 and Bavar-373 air defense systems. If the F-22s have been redeployed to the CENTCOM area of responsibility, it means the Air Force is positioning its most lethal air dominance asset for potential combat operations, and contingency planning for a second, far more devastating strike has moved from theoretical to operational. The logistics trail confirms this assessment with unmistakable clarity. At Moron Air Base in Spain, open-source tracking has confirmed 2 KC-46A Pegasus aerial refueling tankers, 5 KC-135 Stratotankers, 2 C-17 Globemaster 3 strategic airlifters, and 2 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft. The massing of 7 aerial refueling platforms at a single forward staging base is a logistical signal that cannot be misinterpreted. Without tankers, American air power is tethered to geography. With tankers, it is global. The EA-18G Growlers, carrying and /ALQ-99 and next-generation jammer pods that can blind enemy radar and pinpoint emitters for destruction by anti-radiation missiles, indicate the Navy is preparing electronic warfare operations against Iranian air defenses, a prerequisite for any large-scale campaign. Simultaneously, a KC-46 departed Al Udeid in Qatar bound for an undisclosed Gulf location, almost certainly establishing a refueling orbit for Lincoln's combat aircraft at a tempo exceeding peacetime profiles. And a mystery aircraft flying repetitive circular patterns over Qatar, initially identified as a Piper-Cheyenne 3 but exhibiting flight characteristics more consistent with an unmanned platform, is conducting intelligence preparation of the battlespace, systematically collecting enemy electronic emissions that precede any American military operation. So what happens if Iran actually does it? If a single missile, drone, torpedo, or fast attack boat so much as scratches the paint on the USS Abraham Lincoln, the response from the United States will be of a magnitude the Iranian regime cannot begin to comprehend. Not a proportional response, not a carefully calibrated tit-for-tat. The full, unrestrained application of American military power against every element of the Iranian war machine. Missile batteries, launch complexes, underground cities, naval bases, air defenses, command bunkers, communications infrastructure, and the IRGC leadership itself. Midnight Hammer would look like a warning shot. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers would penetrate the most heavily defended airspace with impunity. B-52H Stratofortresses would deliver cruise missile salvos capable of devastating entire military infrastructure in single sorties. B-1B Lancers would add supersonic mass. And the B-21 Raider, the most classified strategic bomber in existence, might make its combat debut, sending a message to every adversary on Earth that America possesses a weapon their defenses cannot see, track, or stop. The F-22s, already redeploying, would establish absolute air superiority within hours. F-35s would hunt mobile launchers through underground networks. Tomahawk cruise missiles from Arleigh Burke destroyers, Ticonderoga cruisers, and Virginia-class submarines would saturate Iranian air defenses with hundreds of simultaneous inbound threats. The concept is not proportionality. It is overwhelming force applied with surgical precision across every domain of warfare simultaneously to achieve the rapid, complete, and irreversible demilitarization of the Iranian regime's offensive capability. Not in weeks, in hours. The IRGC's propaganda fails to account for this reality. The Lincoln is not alone. It is the centerpiece of a carrier strike group with Aegis cruisers tracking hundreds of threats, destroyers armed with SM-3 and SM-6 interceptors, attack submarines that can sink every vessel in the Iranian Navy in a single afternoon, and 90 aircraft projecting more combat power than most national air forces. The layered defense begins with space-based infrared satellites detecting launches, continues with Aegis radar tracking, and concludes with terminal interception and phalanx close-in weapons. Is it perfect? No. In a massive saturation attack, some missiles might penetrate. But the cost of that penetration, hundreds of missiles expended, launch sites revealed and immediately destroyed, the retaliatory devastation that follows, makes the calculus suicidal for any rational actor. And that is the question haunting the intelligence community tonight. Is the Iranian regime rational? The IRGC celebrates martyrdom as devotion, answers to a supreme leader whose worldview incorporates eschatological beliefs about cosmic struggle between Islam and Western imperialism. They watched Midnight Hammer destroy their infrastructure and instead of suing for peace, spent months rebuilding, rearming, and escalating, producing this very video promising to avenge it by sinking the symbol of American naval power. This is not a deterred regime. This is a regime hardening for confrontation it believes is both inevitable and divinely ordained. The pieces are all on the board. Missiles on launch status. Underground cities active. The apex predators vanished from ceremony to classified taskings. Tankers surging. Growlers staging. Intelligence platforms orbiting. And somewhere in the Pentagon, in CENTCOM's underground command centers, in the White House Situation Room, those with authority to unleash the most devastating military force in human history are watching the same data streams and preparing the same contingencies. The United States did not seek this confrontation, but if the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fires upon the USS Abraham Lincoln, the response will be swift, overwhelming, merciless, and permanent. A reminder etched in fire to every hostile power on this planet that American aircraft carriers are not targets of opportunity, but instruments of national power protected by the full fury of the most powerful military force that has ever existed in the recorded history of human civilization. That is not bluster. That is a strategic guarantee backed by the blood and commitment of every man and woman who has ever worn the uniform of the United States Armed Forces. And it is a promise that the American people can take to the bank on this Super Bowl Sunday and every day that follows for as long as this republic endures.